In 1996, a 41-year-old woman named Alice Marie Johnson walked into a federal courtroom in Memphis, Tennessee. She wasn't a murderer. She hadn't hurt anyone. But what she was about to face would change the rest of her life. The judge looked down from the bench and pronounced the words that shattered her world: life in prison without the possibility of parole. For a first-time, non-violent offender, it was an almost unthinkable sentence. The courtroom fell silent. Alice, a single mother of 5, stood there in disbelief, realizing she might never walk free again. But her story, though born in tragedy, would one day become one of the most remarkable tales of redemption and justice in modern America. Alice grew up in Olive Branch, Mississippi, the daughter of hard-working parents who taught her faith, family, and perseverance. For much of her life, she lived those values. She was a home health aide, a choir singer, and a devoted mother. But in the late 1980s, her world began to collapse. Her marriage ended in divorce. Her youngest child was killed in a motorcycle accident. Bills piled up. Eviction notices came. The job market was unforgiving, and she found herself cornered emotionally and financially. Then came a phone call that would seal her fate. A friend introduced her to people running a Memphis-based cocaine trafficking ring. Alice didn't sell drugs. She didn't transport them. She wasn't armed. Her role was what prosecutors later called a telephone mule, a middle link in communication. She passed messages, coordinated pickups, and helped connect buyers and suppliers. In her mind, it was a temporary escape, a way to stabilize for life. But in the eyes of the law, it was conspiracy to distribute cocaine, a charge that carried mandatory sentencing guidelines as harsh as those for violent criminals. When the federal investigation began, many in the network made deals. They cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for lighter sentences. Alice, however, had no information to trade. She wasn't a kingpin, and she didn't have names to offer. And in the rigid world of federal mandatory minimums, that meant only one thing: she would take the full weight of the law. The trial was short. The evidence, largely built on testimony from others seeking plea bargains, was damning. When the verdict came down, it was swift: guilty on all counts. In 1996, Judge Julia Gibbons imposed a sentence that even she seemed reluctant to give: life without parole. There was no flexibility, no discretion. Under federal law, Alice's hands were tied as much as the judge's. For the first time in her life, Alice found herself behind bars. Federal Correctional Institution, Aliceville. For the next 21 years, this would be her home. In prison. Something remarkable happened. Alice didn't crumble. She didn't grow bitter. She transformed. She became a mentor, a minister, and a source of hope for hundreds of women serving time beside her. She taught classes on communication and leadership, volunteered in hospice care, and organized prayer groups. Prison officials described her as a model inmate. One warden even wrote that if he could release her himself, he would, but the system wasn't built for mercy. The federal clemency process had become all but frozen, and thousands of nonviolent offenders like Alice were tracked, serving life for crimes that in many cases would today carry 10 years or less. Years passed. Her children grew up without her. Her parents died before she could say goodbye. Letters became her only connection to the world outside. But she never lost faith. Every night, Alice wrote in her journal, "One day, my story will be told." And one day, it was. In October 2017, a young writer named Mike Scholl stumbled across a video produced by Mike.com, a short profile about Alice's case. The video highlighted the absurdity of her sentence and questioned the fairness of mandatory minimum laws. It began to circulate online. Then something unexpected happened. Kim Kardashian West saw it. At the time, Kim wasn't a political activist. She wasn't known for her work in criminal justice. But when she watched Alice's story, she said later, "It broke something in me. I couldn't believe this woman was still in prison for life for a first-time nonviolent offense." Kim posted the video to her social media accounts, writing simply, "This is so unfair." Millions saw it, and within days, the world knew Alice Marie Johnson's name. Behind the scenes, Kim reached out to attorney Brittany K. Barnett, a former corporate lawyer turned justice reform advocate who had been helping Alice's legal team for years. Together, they crafted a formal clemency petition, a request for the President of the United States to commute Alice's sentence. For context, clemency is an act of mercy. It doesn't erase guilt, but it shortens or ends a sentence when the punishment no longer fits the crime. The petition described Alice's impeccable record in prison, her rehabilitation, and the changing public opinion around the war on drugs. It was a plea not just for Alice, but for all those forgotten by an unforgiving system. Then came the moment that would change everything. Kim Kardashian West walked into the White House. It was May 30th, 2018. In the Oval Office, Kim met with President Donald Trump. The meeting lasted less than an hour. There were no television cameras, no script. Just a conversation about one woman's fate. Kim later said she was nervous but determined. "I told him," she said, "Alice has served over 2 decades. She's a grandmother. She's done everything right. She deserves a second chance." A week later, June 6, 2018, the phone rang inside Aliceville Prison. It was the warden. "Ms. Johnson," he said, "the President has signed your clemency papers. You're going home." For a moment, Alice couldn't speak. The world around her blurred. Then, in disbelief, she asked, "Are you serious?" "Yes," the warden said. "You're free." When the gates opened that afternoon, cameras captured the moment the world had waited for. Alice, stepping out of prison, tears in her eyes, her arms wide open as her family rushed to embrace her. 21 years of confinement ended in one breath. The first thing she did was kneel on the ground, raise her hands, and thank God. It was more than freedom. It was redemption. But her story didn't end there. Alice didn't simply go home and disappear. She became a national voice for reform, traveling across the country to speak about the realities of incarceration, the flaws in sentencing, and the need for compassion in justice. In interviews, she said, "I left prison, but I took every woman I met in there with me. Their stories are still untold." She began working with advocacy organizations, met lawmakers, and even appeared beside Kim Kardashian at events calling for broader criminal justice reform. In 2019, her voice echoed through the halls of power again, when President Trump invited her to speak at the White House during the signing of the First Step Act, a bipartisan bill designed to reform the prison system and reduce sentences for certain nonviolent crimes. In front of cameras, Alice stood tall, wearing white, her voice trembling with emotion as she said, "I am one of the lucky ones. But there are thousands more just like me, still waiting for mercy." The symbolism was undeniable. A woman, once condemned to die behind bars, was now helping reshape the very laws that had imprisoned her. She wrote a book, Afterlife: My Journey from Incarceration to Freedom. It told not just her personal story, but a deeper message about forgiveness, faith, and resilience. In one passage, she wrote, "Prison did not define me, it refined me." For viewers, that line resonates as more than a quote. It's a reflection of what hope looks like when it survives the impossible. Still, her release sparked debates across the nation. Some asked, should celebrity influence play a role in justice? Others argued that Alice's case illuminated systemic injustice, that it took a billionaire's attention to fix something that should never have been broken. Alice, however, chose to see it differently. God used whoever he needed to use, she said, and I'm grateful. Her grace disarmed critics and turned a moment of controversy into a movement of unity. Today, Alice continues to advocate for second chances. She founded the Taking Action for Good Foundation, focused on helping families affected by incarceration rebuild their lives. She visits prisons, mentors newly released women, and works with policymakers to make sure the next Alice Marie Johnson doesn't have to wait 21 years for justice. Her story has inspired documentaries, podcasts, and legislation. But perhaps her greatest legacy is the reminder that mercy isn't weakness. It's strength guided by empathy. As you watch her speak now, her voice carries both pain and peace. She often says, I don't want people to see me as a victim. I want them to see me as a vessel of purpose. And that's exactly what she's become. Visual reenactments could show Alice's transformation across decades. Her younger self in a stark courtroom, her older self in a soft-lit chapel inside prison, teaching others, leading prayer circles, and later walking free into the sunlight. Documents could appear on screen: the original sentencing report, the clemency order signed by the president, and the photo of her first moment of freedom. A split screen could juxtapose the iron bars of her prison cell with her standing at a podium, speaking about justice reform, illustrating how redemption can rise from the hardest places. At its heart, this story isn't about celebrity, politics, or headlines. It's about a mother's resilience. It's about the faith of a woman who believed that no matter how far she'd fallen, she could still rise again. It's about the quiet power of forgiveness, both from society and within oneself. For more than 2 decades, Alice lived in a system that had written her off. But through her strength, she became the face of change for countless others still waiting behind walls. She once said, "Freedom is not just walking outside the gate, it's walking in purpose." And today, she's living that purpose fully. Perhaps the most haunting question of all is one we, as viewers, must ask ourselves. How many more stories like Alice's remain untold? How many lives sit frozen behind bars, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice? Because justice, when it's blind, isn't always fair. But when mercy steps in, it reminds us what humanity truly means. As the screen fades to black, her final words echo softly, words that could guide every person watching. Don't let the mistakes of your past define your future. I'm living proof that redemption is real.